I walked away from my manipulative family, so here's what I did. Hey guys, never thought I'd be posting something like this, but I really need to get it off my chest. For some quick context, my name's Ava. I'm 28, and I've always had this strange dynamic with my older sister, Emma. She's 31 now, and you'd think that 3 extra years would mean more maturity, but you'd be very wrong. Since we were kids, our parents have crowned Emma the golden child. No matter what she did, she always had their backing, even when she absolutely didn't deserve it. Honestly, Emma's life is kind of a hot mess. She jumps from job to job, relationship to relationship, always acting impulsively, yet somehow, she never faces the consequences. I've spent years watching her coast through life on my parents' dime while I've been out here working my tail off. This rivalry, or more accurately, Emma's one-sided obsession with trying to overshadow me started early. If I picked up painting, she'd suddenly announce she was the next Picasso. If I showed interest in volleyball, she'd immediately join a club and brag about how much better she was than me. Even as we grew older, this didn't stop. It escalated. If I mentioned liking a guy, you could bet Emma would flirt her way into his attention. It was exhausting and, honestly, pretty creepy. But the weirdest part wasn't her competitive streak. It was my parents' refusal to see how toxic this was. Whenever I complained, they'd dismiss it, telling me it was just sibling stuff. But this was more than a simple rivalry. Emma always made sure that whatever I cared about, she had to have it too, and do it better, louder, and in front of a bigger audience. However, the breaking point came in college. After years of struggling and saving every penny, I finally got scholarships that covered my tuition. It was the proudest moment of my life, until I casually mentioned it to my parents. Their reaction? They decided that since I didn't need their money, they'd give all the college savings, including my half, to Emma. Yeah, the girl who didn't even have the grades to get accepted into college. To say I felt betrayed would be an understatement. I was stunned. Here I was, doing everything right, achieving things on my own merits, and my reward was losing my financial safety net to fund Emma's endless mistakes. After that, I promised myself I'd never rely on them again. I moved away for college, made new friends, and met the most amazing guy, Liam, who quickly became my rock. Liam was patient, supportive, and genuinely cared for me, and for the first time, I had someone in my corner who saw how messed up my family dynamic was. When we got married, Liam's family hosted a huge, beautiful ceremony. My parents attended, of course, probably curious to see how someone like me landed such a catch, but Emma wasn't invited. I was done letting her overshadow my big moments. Life after marriage was pretty good. Liam and I built a comfortable life together, financially stable and emotionally happy. It felt like I'd finally broken free from my family's toxic cycle. But, of course, happiness wasn't something my parents could tolerate seeing me enjoy without interference. 2 years ago, my parents reached out, sounding unusually desperate. My dad had retired, and apparently, they were struggling financially. They asked if Liam and I could help out, just temporarily. We agreed, thinking it was the right thing to do, and started sending them about $2,500 a month to cover their living expenses and medical bills. At first, things seemed fine. My relationship with my parents felt like it was improving. They thanked us often, acknowledging how generous we'd been, and I cautiously allowed myself to believe that maybe this could finally heal the wounds of my childhood. But then, a couple of weeks ago, my phone lit up at work. Multiple missed calls from my mom and dad. I panicked, assuming it was a health emergency, and immediately called them back. Their voices sounded strained, nervous even, as they launched into their story. "Ava, we need a favor. Your sister Emma is really struggling. She had a miscarriage recently, and now she needs fertility treatments. They're really expensive, around $27,000, and we need you to send that money as soon as possible." I froze, dumbfounded. Emma and I hadn't spoken in years. Not a text, not a call, nothing. Now, suddenly, I was expected to hand over nearly 30 grand without question. "Mom, Dad," I said slowly, trying to contain my disbelief. "I sympathize with Emma, but that's a huge ask. I'm already helping you both financially." They didn't back down. Instead, they hit me with the classic guilt trip. "She's your sister. It's family. You don't have kids. Ava, this is your chance to help our family grow." The implication was clear. Since I hadn't provided grandchildren, somehow, I owed this to them. I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I'll think about it." When I told Liam, he was livid, not just about the amount, but about the manipulation. He'd always been supportive, but this was his breaking point. "This has to stop," he told me firmly. "They can't keep using you." Determined to stand my ground, I went back to my parents with an offer. "I'll lend Emma the money, but only under a legally binding contract. If she doesn't pay it back, I'll take legal action." You'd think I'd slap them. They blew up, accusing me of selfishness and heartlessness, screaming that family doesn't do that. When I didn't budge, my dad blurted out something that changed everything. You've got plenty of money. We've been sending half of your monthly contributions to Emma anyway. What's another 27K? I was speechless. They'd secretly funneled my hard-earned money to Emma for years. That betrayal felt like a knife twisting slowly in my chest. Without another word, I walked out. Liam and I immediately cut off the monthly payments and blocked their numbers. But just when I thought I'd finally escaped their grasp, Emma sent me a nasty text, calling me every terrible name under the sun: spoiled, selfish, greedy. Reading her message hurt, but strangely, it gave me clarity. I'd spent years bending backward, hoping for acceptance that would never come. Now, I was done trying. Liam took matters into his own hands, posting screenshots of Emma's messages and proof of my parents' deceit in our family chat. Instantly, everything exploded. Relatives were outraged, demanding explanations from my parents. Embarrassed and cornered, they begged us to delete the messages, but Liam refused. My parents' reputation crumbled overnight, and I felt no guilt. They had dug their own grave, and it wasn't my responsibility to rescue them anymore. That night, lying in bed beside Liam, relief washed over me. I'd finally cut the strings tying me to years of manipulation and emotional blackmail. But just when I thought it was all over, a message appeared on my phone screen. A desperate plea from my mother. Ava, please come home. Something terrible has happened. My heart skipped a beat as anxiety flooded me. Despite everything, a part of me still felt obligated to them. But was it another manipulation? Or was this actually real? Whatever it was, I knew one thing clearly. This time, I wouldn't let them control me again. I sat there staring at my phone, my mother's message glowing against the dark screen. Ava, please come home. Something terrible has happened. It was a simple sentence, but it sent my heart racing. After everything they had pulled, I should have ignored it, blocked their numbers, moved on with my life. But despite everything, there was still that nagging, stupid part of me that wondered, was this real or just another manipulation? Liam walked into the room and immediately noticed my expression. What's wrong? He asked, eyeing my phone warily. I handed it to him. He read the message, then looked at me, unimpressed. And you think this is real? I shrugged, feeling torn. I don't know. What if something actually happened? Liam exhaled sharply. Ava, after what they did, they funneled your money to Emma behind your back. They guilt-tripped you into covering their bills. And now they suddenly want you to come home? You really think this isn't another guilt trip? I didn't answer right away. I knew he was right. Logically, I knew. But emotionally? That was a different story. Liam sighed, his tone softer this time. Look, if you really want to check in, call them. Don't go there. If it's another setup, you'll regret it. I nodded, deciding that was the best middle ground. I dialed my mom's number, my hands slightly sweaty against the phone. She picked up instantly. Ava. Mom, I said cautiously. What's going on? Her breathing was shaky. It's Emma. She was in a car accident. She's in the hospital. My stomach twisted. As much as I resented her, I never wished her harm. Is she okay? She's alive, my mom said, her voice trembling. But it's bad, Ava. The doctors say she's going to need months of rehab. She can't work. She can't live alone. I closed my eyes. I could already feel where this was going. Mom, I said slowly, why are you telling me this? She hesitated, then finally said the words I was waiting for. She needs help. Ava, she needs you. I clenched my jaw. No, not. She has no one else. My mom snapped, her voice suddenly hard. She can't pay rent. She can't afford rehab. If you don't step up, she'll lose everything. I let out a sharp laugh, disbelief flooding me. Oh, you mean like how you guys left me with nothing? Or how you stole my money to support her behind my back? And now you expect me to step in and clean up another mess? She's your sister. My mom shot back, her tone desperate. Family helps each other. I was done. So, done. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before responding. No, Mom. I helped. For years. You and Dad made it clear that Emma is the priority. So let her be your priority now. She started to argue, but I ended the call before she could say another word. Liam, who had been listening the whole time, nodded approvingly. Proud of you. I smiled weakly, but inside, my emotions were a mess. It hurt, not because I felt guilty, but because I finally understood that no matter what happened, they would never change. And honestly, that realization was both freeing and heartbreaking at the same time. But I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't over. And sure enough, within 48 hours, my parents launched an all-out campaign to turn the entire family against me. It started with a Facebook post. My mom, the queen of playing the victim, wrote a long, dramatic message about ungrateful children and how family should always come first. She never mentioned me by name, but it was obvious who she was talking about. Then came the calls and texts. "Aunt Barbara, I don't know what happened between you and your parents, but is it true you refused to help Emma when she was in the hospital? That's cold. Ava. Uncle Greg. Family is everything. You'll regret turning your back on your sister one day." Even my grandmother, the woman who barely spoke to me growing up, sent a message. "Your mother is heartbroken. Please reconsider." I was fuming. How did I go from the family doormat to the villain overnight? I wanted to scream my side of the story for the world to hear. I wanted to tell everyone how my parents stole from me, how Emma had spent years treating me like garbage, how I was done being their safety net. But I didn't, because arguing with people who have already chosen their side is a waste of breath. Instead, I sent one final message in the family group chat. "Since everyone seems so concerned about Emma, I hope you're all reaching into your wallets to help her out. Funny how no one asked why mom and dad were expecting me, and only me, to fund her life. If anyone wants to continue this discussion, my Venmo is open for donations. Otherwise, leave me alone." And with that, I muted the chat and turned off my phone. Days passed. Then weeks. For the first time in my life, my parents weren't in control of me anymore. They had spent years making me feel like I had to be the responsible one, the fixer, the one who always said yes. But they had pushed too far. And finally, I was free. Emma? She ended up moving in with my parents. From what I heard through the grapevine, her recovery was slow, expensive, and 10 times harder without my financial support. I should have felt guilty, maybe even a little sad. But all I felt was peace. For the first time, I was putting myself first. And trust me, it felt amazing. But just when I thought my family drama was behind me for good, an unexpected email landed in my inbox. It was from a lawyer. And when I opened it, I nearly dropped my phone. Because it wasn't just about Emma. It was about my parents. And the final play they were about to make was their most desperate one yet. The moment I saw the email, my stomach twisted. The subject line alone sent a wave of unease through me. Urgent. Legal notice regarding family financial matters. Liam walked into the room just as I sat there frozen, staring at my phone like it had just burst into flames. He took one look at my expression and frowned. "What now?" Wordlessly, I handed him my phone. He skimmed through the email quickly, his face darkening as he read aloud. "Dear Ms. Carter, we are reaching out on behalf of your parents, James and Linda Carter, regarding financial obligations and potential estate matters. It has come to their attention that in light of recent family developments, further discussion is required to ensure fairness and support for all parties involved. Please be advised that failure to respond may result in escalated legal actions. Kindly contact our office at your earliest convenience." Liam let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." I blinked, trying to process. Are they actually trying to sue me? Liam set my phone down on the counter and crossed his arms. No lawyer writes this vaguely unless they're fishing for intimidation. They're probably just trying to scare you into paying for Emma's recovery. And suddenly, it clicked. This wasn't just about guilt tripping anymore. This was full-blown financial extortion. I inhaled deeply, forcing myself to think rationally. I'm calling their bluff. Liam grinned. That's my girl. I didn't bother calling my parents. Instead, I called the lawyer's office directly. A receptionist answered, polite but stiff. "Yes, I received an email regarding my financial obligations to my family," I said coolly. "Care to explain?" There was a brief pause before the voice on the other end sighed. "Let me transfer you to Mr. Lawson." Seconds later, a gruff voice came through. "MS. Carter, thank you for calling. Your parents." I cut him off. Let's not waste time. My parents are broke and want me to fund my sister's life. What exactly do they think they have to sue me for? He hesitated, clearly thrown by my bluntness. Your parents have expressed concerns that you may have been financially supported by them in the past, and as such, they believe it would be equitable for you to reciprocate in their time of need. I let out an actual laugh. Oh, that's cute. So let me get this straight. They stole my college fund, funneled my money to Emma, and now they think they can legally force me to keep paying. Mr. Lawson coughed awkwardly. Legally speaking, there is no obligation. Then why are you sending intimidation emails? A long pause. Then, begrudgingly, he admitted, your parents hoped the formal approach might encourage a discussion. Ah, there it was. They had no real case. This was just another manipulation tactic. They figured if they threw around words like legal action and fairness, I'd panic and give in. I smiled, but there was no humor in it. Well, Mr. Lawson, consider this my formal response. If my parents contact me through your office again, I will file for harassment. And if they try to escalate this, I'll make sure every financial record of their behavior, every dime they took from me without permission, becomes public knowledge. A beat of silence. Then, in a tight voice, he said, "Understood, Miss Carter." I hung up without another word. The fallout came fast. Within hours, my phone exploded with messages. My parents were furious. Emma, calling me names. Even random relatives who had previously stayed out of it were suddenly texting, demanding to know why I would threaten my parents. The best part? I hadn't threatened them. I just made it clear that their games wouldn't work anymore. Liam and I spent the night drinking wine and reading through the ridiculous messages. Some highlights included: "You're so heartless, Ava. How can you abandon your family when we need you the most? Mom and Dad gave you life, and this is how you repay them? Shame on you. Emma is suffering. I hope you can sleep at night knowing you could have helped but chose selfishness instead." But my absolute favorite came from my Aunt Barbara, who had always been two-faced. "I really hope you reflect on your behavior and ask yourself if this is the kind of person you want to be." I snorted and replied, "Aunt Barbara, I did reflect. I realized that the person I want to be is someone who doesn't get manipulated into financial servitude by selfish people. Thanks for the inspiration." She left me on read. Days passed. Then weeks. The messages slowed, then stopped entirely. It was eerily quiet, like the entire family had collectively decided to pretend I didn't exist. And honestly, it was the best silence I'd ever heard. For the first time in my life, I felt weightless. No more guilt, no more expectations, no more being forced into a role I never agreed to. But just when I thought it was finally over, I got one last unexpected message. It was from Emma. Unlike her previous rants, this message was different. Short. Simple. "Ava, I get it now. I do. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to say that. I'm sorry." I stared at the words for a long time, completely floored. I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. But maybe, just maybe, Emma had finally learned what it felt like to be left behind. And for once, I wasn't the one being left behind. I was the one moving forward. I never expected Emma to apologize. Not in a million years. For as long as I could remember, she had been the center of my parents' universe, never once acknowledging the damage her entitlement had caused. And now, out of nowhere, she sends me a text. Liam read over my shoulder, raising an eyebrow. "So, are we thinking genuine remorse or last-ditch manipulation?" I exhaled slowly, staring at my phone. Honestly, I have no idea. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I genuinely didn't know how to respond. For the first time in my life, Emma wasn't demanding something from me. She wasn't bragging, blaming, or trying to one-up me. She was just apologizing. It was weird, but just because she suddenly grew a conscience didn't mean I was about to let my guard down. Instead of answering, I tucked my phone away and decided to let it sit. If she truly meant it, she'd try again. If not, well, then, nothing was lost. Days turned into weeks. The silence from my parents continued. It was like they had finally accepted that I wasn't going to come running back. And God, it felt good. For the first time, my life was completely mine. No guilt trips, no sudden financial demands, no exhausting conversations where I had to justify my own boundaries. I focused on my work, my marriage, and my happiness. Liam and I even took a trip to Italy, something I would never have done before, knowing my parents would have guilted me into feeling selfish for spending money on myself. While strolling through the streets of Florence, sipping wine, I realized something. I wasn't just free from my family. I was finally free from the guilt they'd conditioned into me. And that was worth more than any apology could ever be. Then, out of nowhere, Emma called. Not a text. Not another half-hearted attempt through a message. A full phone call. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. "Are you going to answer?" Liam asked, watching me carefully. I hesitated, then took a deep breath and pressed accept. "Ava." Emma's voice was quiet, unsure. "Yeah." A long pause. Then she sighed. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up. Honestly, I wasn't sure either." She let out a small laugh, but there was no arrogance in it. No smugness. Just exhaustion. I wanted to say it again. I meant what I said before. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "For everything." I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, gripping my phone tightly. What changed? Emma took a deep breath. Being left with Mom and Dad. That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She let out another tired laugh, one that sounded nothing like the Emma I used to know. "After you cut them off, they turned to me. At first, I thought it'd be fine. They'd always taken care of me, right? But," she hesitated, her voice thick with emotion. "They didn't change, Ava. The way they used to treat you? They turned it on me." I felt my stomach drop. She continued, her voice small. They started making me feel guilty, telling me I owed them for all the years they took care of me, that I should be the one paying their bills now. And when I couldn't, they got angry. I stayed silent, letting her talk. For the first time, I got a taste of what you went through. And I didn't like it. She swallowed hard. I kept thinking, God, is this how they treated Ava all those years? Did I just never see it? Tears pricked at my eyes, but I held them back. Look, Emma continued, her voice steadier now. I don't expect us to be best friends overnight. I don't even expect you to forgive me. But I needed you to know, I get it now. And I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. This wasn't a manipulation. This was real. And for the first time in my life, Emma, ***, the sister who always dismissed me, ignored me, took everything for granted, ***, was finally seeing me. Seeing what they had done. I exhaled slowly, gripping my phone. I appreciate that, I said quietly. I really do. A long pause. Then, hesitantly, she asked, do you think we could start over? Not as enemies. Just as sisters. I hesitated. Could I trust her again? Part of me still wanted to keep my walls up. But another part of me, the part that had spent years craving an actual sibling relationship, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was real. So I made a decision. A cautious one. A small step. We can try, I said carefully. But it's going to take time. Emma sniffled on the other end. That's all I'm asking for. For the first time in my life, I believed her. And for the first time, I thought maybe we weren't lost causes after all. I never expected Emma to change. A part of me still doubted her sincerity, even after that conversation. But something inside me shifted. For the first time, she wasn't just the golden child, the center of my parents' world. She had seen the reality of what they were like, the manipulation, the endless guilt, the crushing weight of being their chosen one. I didn't let my guard down completely. I wasn't naive. But I allowed a small space for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, Emma and I could find something real. Not as rivals, not as competitors, but as sisters. Still, I wasn't about to rush into anything. I kept my distance, observing from the sidelines. Emma struggled. After years of being shielded, she was suddenly responsible for herself. My parents had never taught her how to stand on her own feet, and now, without their constant support, she had to learn everything the hard way. She started working again. Working, not the half-hearted jobs she used to quit within weeks. She moved into a smaller apartment, one she could barely afford, but she was determined not to go crawling back to my parents. A part of me respected that. But my parents, they weren't adapting as well. Their calls to me had stopped completely, which was a relief. But I heard from distant relatives that things weren't going well for them. Without my financial support, without Emma's ability to play the favorite child, they were struggling. The retirement they had imagined, one where their children took care of them without question, was crumbling. I should have felt guilty. Once, I would have. But instead, all I felt was a strange kind of clarity. They had built this reality for themselves. They had chosen to favor one child and discard the other. They had used me, manipulated me, and treated me as a resource instead of a daughter. Now, when they needed help the most, neither of their children were there to pick up the pieces. It wasn't cruelty on my part. It wasn't revenge. It was consequences. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Emma and I spoke occasionally, not often, but more than we ever had before. The conversations were different. There was no competition, no one-upmanship. Just two people trying to figure out what a real relationship looked like without all the childhood baggage. One evening, I got an unexpected message from her. I signed up for therapy. Just wanted you to know. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling something complicated stir inside me. I didn't reply right away. I didn't know what to say. But later that night, as I sat in bed, I finally typed out a simple response. That's a good step. No more, no less. It wasn't a grand declaration of forgiveness, but it was an acknowledgement, a start. Strangely, that was enough. My parents, however, were another story. They had burned too many bridges and played too many games, and now the consequences were inescapable. Their reputation in the family had crumbled. After years of trying to maintain the illusion of being devoted parents, their true colors had finally shown. No one wanted to deal with them. Even Aunt Barbara, once their most vocal supporter, had distanced herself after seeing how quickly they turned on Emma when she stopped being their puppet. Their financial situation worsened. I heard whispers through the family that they were considering selling the house, downsizing to something smaller. It was ironic. Once, they had a financially stable daughter who would have gladly helped them in their later years. They had thrown that away for favoritism, and now they were left with nothing. One afternoon, as I was preparing to head out, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. expecting another work notification or a message from Liam. Instead, it was my father. I hesitated. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. The last conversation we'd had was when he tried to intimidate me through his lawyer. Now, here he was, reaching out as if nothing had happened. I let the phone ring. A voicemail popped up a moment later, but I didn't listen to it. Instead, I deleted it without a second thought. Because of whatever he had to say, it didn't matter anymore. Ignoring my father's voicemail felt like closing the final chapter of a book I never wanted to read in the first place. For years, I had been waiting for something: recognition, respect, maybe even love. But now, I realize I didn't need any of it. I had spent my entire life being the responsible one, the one who held everything together, while Emma got to stumble through life with my parents cleaning up her messes. When I finally walked away, they scrambled to find someone else to rely on, first Emma, and now, when she refused to fall back into their cycle, they were circling back to me. It was pathetic, but I wasn't playing that game anymore. The next few weeks passed quietly. For the first time, my life wasn't overshadowed by my family's expectations or their never-ending needs. I focused on work, my marriage, and my happiness. And it was peaceful. Until, out of nowhere, my mother showed up at my doorstep. I opened the door to see her standing there, looking far older than I remembered. Her once perfectly styled hair was unkempt, and there were deep lines on her face that hadn't been there before. She looked tired. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, as if waiting for me to invite her in. I didn't. Instead, I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "What do you want?" She flinched slightly, as if she hadn't expected me to be so direct. "Ava, I just wanted to talk." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny. Last time you wanted to talk, you had a lawyer send me an intimidation email." Her face flushed with embarrassment, and she sighed. That was a mistake." I said nothing. She glanced away, staring at the ground like it held the answers she was looking for. "Your father and I were selling the house." I should have felt something: relief, satisfaction, even pity. But all I felt was nothing. I nodded once. "Okay." She hesitated again, as if she expected me to ask why. When I didn't, she cleared her throat awkwardly. "We made mistakes, Ava. We didn't see things clearly when we had the chance. And now, well, we've lost a lot." I knew she wanted me to ask what she meant by "lost a lot." I didn't. She let out a shaky breath. "Your father wanted to reach out, but he didn't know how. He regrets everything." I tilted my head slightly. "Does he regret it because he's actually sorry? Or because he lost control?" She winced, like she hadn't expected me to see through their act so easily. "Ava." "No, really," I pressed, my voice steady. "Because as far as I remember, he only ever reached out to me when he wanted money. And now, suddenly, you're here. Right when you're selling the house. Right when you've run out of options." Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Because she knew. She knew I was right. She took a slow breath, blinking back something that almost looked like regret. "I know we don't deserve forgiveness. And I know I can't undo what we did to you. But I needed to say it. I'm sorry, Ava. For all of it." Her voice wavered, and for the first time, it felt genuine. Not manipulative. Not forced. Not crafted to guilt me into something. Real. And that was almost worse, because I had spent years wanting to hear those words. But now that they were finally here, they felt empty. Because, sorry, it didn't fix anything. I sighed, glancing at the street behind her. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the sidewalk. The old version of me would have taken this as a sign that maybe, just maybe, my family was worth saving. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I met my mother's gaze, my expression unreadable. "I accept your apology," I said finally. Her shoulders sagged with relief. "Ava, that means so much. But that doesn't mean I want a relationship with you." The relief on her face evaporated instantly. She swallowed hard. "Ava, please." I shook my head. "You made your choices. I made mine. And my choice is to put myself first for the first time in my life." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't cave. Not this time. I took a slow, steady breath. "I hope you figure things out." "I do. But I'm not part of this anymore." Closing that door felt like sealing off a chapter of my life that had dragged on for far too long. I stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath, letting the silence settle around me. There was no satisfaction in watching my mother walk away, no sense of triumph in knowing my parents had finally lost everything. Just a quiet, steady realization: this was the end. Not in the dramatic, explosive way I had once imagined, but in a way that simply was. I had finally freed myself. The next few months passed in peace. Real peace. The kind that wasn't constantly interrupted by guilt-tripping phone calls or manipulative messages. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing myself for the next demand, the next crisis, the next expectation that I sacrifice myself for the sake of family. And I didn't miss it, not even a little. Liam and I focused on building the life we had always wanted, one that belonged entirely to us. We traveled more, planned for a future without the weight of my family's expectations hanging over my head. It was liberating in a way I hadn't even realized I needed. But the strangest part? Emma. She stayed in touch. Not often, not in an intrusive way, but in small, careful ways. A text here and there. Here is a quick update about her life. A genuine attempt to repair what was left between us. I never fully let my guard down. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. But I allowed her into my life in a way I never thought I would. Slowly, cautiously, and maybe, someday, we could truly be sisters. One evening, as Liam and I sat on the balcony watching the sunset, my phone buzzed with a notification from an old family group chat I had long muted. Curious, I opened it. It was a message from Aunt Barbara. Your parents officially sold the house. Moved into a rental. I think reality finally hit them. I stared at the words for a moment, letting them sink in. My childhood home. The place where I had grown up feeling unwanted, overlooked, used. It was gone. And with it, the last physical tie I had to my old life. I expected to feel something. Nostalgia, sadness, maybe even a twinge of regret. But I felt nothing. I turned off my phone, leaned back into my chair, and watched as the sun dipped below the horizon. For the first time in forever, I had no unfinished business. No obligations. No family burden waiting to crash down on me. Just freedom. And trust me, it felt incredible.